we roll there. Some rock, some wind, some roll there. Some rock, some wind, some roll there. Some rock, some wind, some roll there. Some rock, some wind.
Hi, my name is Loris Kroll, and we are executing a Showtime. Zig SHOWTIME is a show and a community for makers. Watch the show to learn about interesting projects and join the Discord server to share what you're working on and to collaborate with other members of the community. And if that's not your style or you're new to Zig, make sure to check the other Zig communities to find the one that suits you best. So, hello, episode 26. I see somebody saying louder, please. I think you should be able to hear me correctly. Check the volume on your side. So episode 26, yes. We're going to have an interview. The interview format has been changing over time because as we discovered that doing too many things at once, maybe it's not as nice for everybody. But the general goal of the interviews, I think it's kind of the same, and it's about exploring interesting things that happen in the open source world. Now, before we get into the interview with Andreas, let me bring up just one piece of news, which is also a little bit self-serving, maybe. But the only thing I wanted to point out, and actually, I think this is the most logical way of presenting it. So I've been watching Andreas' YouTube channel for a while now, and I like the Car Talk series. The problem is that I don't own a car and I hate driving. So for me, it's obviously not going to be a Car Talk, but I like coffee. And so I call this series Coffee Time. I know, unimaginable pun in the title, but that's what it is. And the idea is that if you have questions that you want to me to answer on stream, feel free. I can provide the point of view of somebody who is involved in the Zig project from I think a little bit of an uncommon perspective, because Zig is not just software development, right? It's also a social project, and I think that's also interesting. So anyway, you let me know. I think I'll also use it as an excuse to rant about things when I don't get questions. Also, I've been told that the intro, people like the intro, and also the coffee machine is nice. Like you can see a very nice coffee being made there. So, okay, so that's it for the news. So I would say, without further ado, I need to find the right scene, and we can introduce Andreas. So, well, hello, Andreas. How are you?
Well, hello, Loris. I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. It's getting a little bit hot, but still fine. How is it in Sweden?
Yeah, it's hot as well, but I've been prepared this year. Last year I had the heaters turned up half of the summer without realizing it.
Oh, no.
I'm doing it the right way this time.
I see. That's tough. Okay, so let me bring up my notes. So I'm very happy to be able to host this interview. I wanted to do this for a while, and I still remember. So I mentioned earlier, right? You were listening that I have a series basically inspired by your series, Car Talk.
Yeah, I saw your first video.
Oh, you did? Awesome. So I also took inspiration from one of your things for the title of this interview. So I'm super proud with the title. I think Tech, Taste, and Soul is an amazing title, but it's from a video that Andreas made where he was asked to compare different browser engines, and he mentioned that he wanted to evaluate them across three different dimensions: tech, taste, and soul. Now, I took this idea because I think it's great, but I want to point this out, and I want to define what these words mean for the context of this interview. So I also want to point out that if you go and watch his video, so first of all, I will give my definition as a starting point. Point number two, it's not just only my definition I'm giving, but it's 100% not exactly the definition that he used when making that video. So make sure that you understand precisely what, different namespaces, different meanings, even though it's the same symbol. We should be used to, I think, those concepts. As my interpretation, what I wanted to do is, in my opinion, for this interview, for tech, I wouldn't consider tech like as one category. I would say that the title should be understood as in, let's talk about technology, focusing on taste and soul. So for me, taste is, yes, when you say that somebody has good taste or something is in good or bad taste, it is a subjective evaluation to a degree. So, they say in Latin, de gustibus non disputatum est. But I don't think it's an entirely, completely subjective evaluation of something. I think there is something more there. More precisely, when you're evaluating something that is complex, that has a lot of things, a lot of constraints, a lot of things that can be done better or worse, normally you're never able to get like the best of all possible worlds. You have to make a choice, you have to make a trade-off. And so what ends up being is that you accept to not be the best at something in exchange for an extra advantage on another side. And we do that in software all the time. So in my opinion, taste is it's like a very succinct way of evaluating a complex set of properties in a holistic way. You look at the thing from the overall perspective and you realize that maybe it's not the best of everything, but it's like, basically, from my perspective, having good taste means being able to appreciate the sweet spots in a design space. When it comes to soul, my interpretation of what we tend to mean with soul is like, it's like the expectation that there is something past just like the basic utilitaristic principles that guide something. So an organization that is just there for make money doesn't seem to have a lot of soul. But if you are there to do something more than just money, then maybe you start thinking that something has a little bit of soul. So it's about, I guess, principles that you can rely on to understand the behavior of something that don't change too much over time. And I think that's also what we mean with individuals. But for example, a startup that has a mission where they say, oh, we want to make the world a better place, but then they only aim for like an early exit. That's obviously a company with not much soul. Companies instead that try to actually do something else and actually prove that they do for real, maybe you could argue that they have a little bit of soul. At the end of the day, it boils down to the humans that are in that place. But organizations do have an influence on this. Some organizations, it's impossible to do anything past make profit. So, or try to at least. So this is where I start from. So I would say, Andreas, what do you think of these definitions? Do you disagree? Would you add anything?
So I think your definitions are pretty close to my own. You're very cerebral about it. I guess I tend to take more of a practical perspective. I think taste for me is largely about saying no to things instead of saying yes to things, and knowing when to keep something simple instead of getting fancy. Even though you have all these fancy techniques at your disposal, good taste is about like using the simple thing because it's the better fit. It's a bit like being the drummer in the Beatles or something like that, where it sounds the best if you just sit there and play straight. And I think that's what taste is about for me, like knowing what fits, and also about like not holding on to bad ideas just because you've sunk time into them. And then when it comes to soul, I do largely agree with what you said. I think I would also add that for me, soul is about developers feeling like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And this weird feeling that you get in projects like that, where it feels like the project has a spirit of its own that sort of energizes the people who participate in it. And you don't generally see that in corporate projects.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think those are great additions. Totally, man. I've been when you were saying the part about soul, I was thinking of I don't remember the precise title, but there was this blog post a while ago about most tech jobs being basically useless jobs, which I think is something real that people experience for real, where what you're doing, you know that most of your work it's either wasted, or even when it's not wasted, it's useless at the end. And that's
Yeah,
terrible.
there's a lot of people building things that will never see the light of day. And that is pretty sad. At the same time, like we do have to prototype things. It's not much different than science, for example, where like sometimes you end up spending a lot of time just discovering that something is not possible, right? But that's
Mhm.
still valuable. But it can be difficult, I think, for people to come to terms with their baby never seeing the light of day.
Yeah.
It weighs on you, I can imagine. I don't personally have experience working on any longer term projects like that, so I don't want to speak to that too much.
Wow, then you've been pretty lucky. I remember um, when I went to Singapore and I did some consultancy work there, and man, some things were great. Like you're sent abroad to work on a big project. Everything seems important. They spend a lot of money on you. Maybe it's not money that they give to you, but at least everything feels nice, except that as the technical person that, or maybe that you don't always know, but at least in that case, I felt like I kind of knew that, yeah, what we were working on was completely useless, and maybe between not even ever seeing, like, not ever going to production would have been even better than. Anyway, it's fine in tech, and it's very often, at the end of the day, a bad thing. But so let's talk about a nice project instead. Let's talk about Serenity. How's it going? Or actually, first question: how did it feel to wake up the first day after you left your job, and the first day when you started full time on Serenity? How was it?
Uh, well, I had a hard time getting out of my waking up really early routine. So the first day I was honestly a little bit cranky because I realized that I could have slept way longer. uh, so, but outside of that, it was great. It
Awesome.
really was. Yeah. So the project is doing absolutely fantastic. And if anybody's not aware, I was recently able to quit my day job and switch to Serenity development full time, thanks to sponsorships and donations from fans of the system, and that obviously is super exciting, and it sort of marks yet another interesting like point on the timeline of the ever expanding Serenity project, and um, we have seen just huge growth in developers joining the project, um, in the scope of the project, and also in like basically every metric that's fun and none of the metrics that are not fun. Everything is going in the good direction. So that's really good.
That's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
awesome.
And I want to say also that the metric that I'm personally most excited about lately is that another developer on the project, Linus, has joined GitHub sponsors as well and is already like amassing sponsors to help him work more on Serenity. And I find that super exciting.
Oh,
That
nice.
I don't know. There's just something about this crowdfunding of open source projects that really warms my heart. So it's awesome to
Nice.
see that.
Yeah, I see you have 229 sponsors. I'm not logged in this browser, but I'm proud to be one of them. And also Linux.
Thank you.
Nice. Nice. I don't know, there's something with the Linux name and OS development. It seems to work so well.
Yeah, and he has a very ambiguous profile picture as well,
It
which is great.
does? Oh, yeah, true. okay, that's really great, by the way. I'm so
Yeah,
happy.
but The project is going beautifully, and somehow we are miraculously still sticking to the sort of the original vision that I had when it was just me, which was just to build like a Unix-like system with 1990s look and feel GUI. And despite having hundreds of people working on it now, like nobody's screwing it up. It's amazing. And yeah, I couldn't be happier about it actually.
Mhm. I guess you could say that going back to our original definitions, that's kind of like the proof in the pudding that that's a project with a soul, because that's one of those properties that resist over time, right? It's one of those intangible things that are actually the soul of the project, and as long as you are able to maintain that, then everything goes well.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And I had a lot of concerns earlier about my own scalability, right? And
Yeah.
everything being based on my vision. But I think I've been very lucky to be able to convey so much of my vision in such a high fidelity, thanks to YouTube videos and stuff like that, that people understand what we're doing
Mhm.
so well that that it works even without me there for a lot of it, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's great. So okay, so let's start. I would say. Oh, actually, no. One last question about this intro to Serenity, the Serenity as the project. Before we move to the next part. So I know that you have a Discord server. I know that you had an IRC channel. So you told me, I believe, the other day that the IRC channel is no more, and now the entire community is on Discord.
So yeah, right. So the Discord is our official meeting location and communication hub. We used to be an IRC, but in the end, people abandoned it, and all the relevant discussion happens on Discord. So we might as well acknowledge that. And um, because it is sad sometimes when I join the old IRC channel and I see somebody was in there, 8 hours ago saying, "Hello, anybody there?"
Oh no.
So I rather they don't have that experience.
Yeah, but I believe that if you say something along the lines that the channel is abandoned, like your channel gets repossessed or something. I think that happened to a bunch of channel on Freenode when they moved.
Yeah, I see Freenode is in a peculiar situation
Yeah,
lately, as we all know.
it, it's
And
it's IRC drama in 2021. That's uh, sad,
yeah,
but also
yeah,
amazing.
it's hilarious that it's 2021 and we have IRC server drama. Um, um, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. It's I'm glad to be out of it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
I would rather not have our project mixed up with this type of stuff.
I see. Yeah, I think I should keep that in mind, because I think that this is going to be relevant for a question down the line. So, okay, let's rewind everything though. So, I think everybody here already knew who you were from the start, but we mentioned SerenityOS. We know now that you went full time on it, but let's rewind the clock and let's talk about a little bit in the past, because I think helps then give some more background about what you did before and explain more why I'm asking you, why I'm going to ask the questions that I will ask later. So you did work in big tech in the past, and so my question would be like, how was the experience? I'm sure that you learned some good things from there, I would assume, and also the fact that you're not working in big tech anymore means that you also find out things that you didn't like about it. And so, like, what made you leave in the end? How was it in general?
Mm. Yeah, so I spent many, many years working in big tech. I started out in Nokia, um, and then went to Apple. I spent many years there, and I was doing browsers at both companies. And it was a good time originally. Like so many young people who get into programming, in my age group at least, I wanted to move out to Silicon Valley and be part of the scene. So that was a goal of mine for a long time, and I ended up doing that. And there are so many good things I can say about it. So I guess I'll start with the good things. That it is it is very exciting to work on stuff that runs on millions of people's devices every day. Uh, and I was particularly attracted to being able to see like the impact of a 1% improvement on something when you pull that out to scale. So say that you save like 1% of battery life per day on an iPhone, right? And then you spread that over all the iPhones in the world, and suddenly you're saving so much power. And I don't know, there was something about that, like just the extremely leveraged performance work that you could do that was really interesting. And the people that you work with in big tech are often very, very strong people, like very clever people, very principled people. And you really have all kinds of people there. Like there's people who are really book smart, and there's people who are really street smart as well. And um, I don't know if any other place other than big tech where they like collect those people and put them all in one room. The open source community has a lot of the same type of people, but they are sort of distributed over the world instead. You don't get them all into one room in the same way. And I did enjoy hanging out with those people. Um, I also learned in big tech about the power of incremental work uh, and just how much you can achieve by laying one brick every day. That wasn't really something I had understood before because I was used to like we have to build these 3 features for the client, and this is the time frame, right? And going into big tech where there's a lot of money basically, and you're not really at risk of losing your job because the customer is not paying or whatever. So there's a different attitude towards like incremental work and long-term solutions and things like that. And that's one of the things that I try to bring with me out from big tech now into Serenity, and to show people that, hey, if we just put one brick down every day, you won't believe what we're going to make. And I think I've been able to show people already quite a lot of that effect, which has been a lot of fun. And something I've been thinking about a bit recently is also that about technical debt, because I think a lot of people misunderstand technical debt, and they think that it's like this really bad thing. But at least my experience in big tech was that technical debt is very much used as a tool to give yourself sort of development buying power that you don't normally have. Like you build things in a less than ideal way, and you're able to like build something really large really fast, and then if you're principled and structured, you can actually go and patch those things up incrementally later on. So these are all the great things that I remember from big tech. Of course, I do have to switch over to the negative things because that's how things ended up for me. The big negative that I experienced, and many people have told me they experienced, is how it drains your energy for personal projects and for programming in general, because you end up putting so much of your programming energy, your love for programming, into your job, and there isn't that much left of it at the end of the day somehow, and that can be good and bad. If you find what you do really, really rewarding, then it is pretty good. But at some point, like it's not common that somebody does rewarding work every single day at their tech job. So I don't know. That became an issue for me, that I started feeling like I love programming, but I don't ever want to do it in my free time. And what's up with that? And also, a lot of people in big tech are heavily constrained with regards to personal intellectual property. Like if you invent anything or even just think of something clever in your free time when you're employed by a big tech company, that can be really tricky to keep that idea attached to your own name. And I was constantly I don't want to say pestered, but like strongly encouraged by my management to file more patents. And um, it was a little bit of a complaint, I guess, they had about me that I didn't want to do that. So that became kind of irritating in the long run. But the thing that finally killed big tech for me was that it became extremely political, and it just I don't know. I guess it was around 2015, 2016 when everybody suddenly became an armchair political commentator, and it seemed people's main interests switched from programming to Twitter, and I didn't feel at home in that environment anymore, so I kind of just wanted out of it. And that's why I ended up leaving, and I've never regretted that. Um, but I am very grateful for all the good things I learned. I think I stayed long enough to learn most of the valuable lessons that I could, and I'm doing what I can to spread those lessons like to everybody now, because I think I see how open source projects are run, and I do think that um, there's a lot they can learn from how big tech operates, and I mean vice versa as well. But I think big tech companies are much better at learning from open source projects than the other way around, because open source projects are kind of resistant to big tech ways of thinking. So that's something that I try to do.
That's a very good point. I'm thinking about my own experience, and I wasn't in big tech, I guess, for that long, but the brief moment in time in which I did learn a few things, and I agree that like they do inform my decision making on the daily. At the end of the day, like with everything, it matters what like certain techniques, certain things that you learn. For example, not to pick fights on Twitter when there is no point, because when you're discussing on Twitter, it's not just you and the person that you're discussing with, who most of the time is just there to say their thing. They don't even care about engaging, but there's also the public, and these are all things that it's good to keep in mind. It's very good. They help you a lot, and yeah, I agree. These are all things that, like, if open source knew how to do these things well, it would be able to, it would level the playing field, and there would be less complaints about the open source being like eaten by big tech and similar things.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so this is your experience in the past. Nice. So I think we are almost there to talk more about Serenity. I have just one topic that I want to touch upon before we get there, which is, I think I mentioned this also in the pre-show, which I think it's very relevant because you walked into the wrong neighborhood. So so no, the thing is, SerenityOS is written in C++, and you love C++, or rather, I don't know if you love it, but you like it, right? You don't mind it.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan, okay. We at least you like it enough to write an entire kernel and OS with it, right?
Yeah, right.
So here in the Z community, we love to crack jokes at C++, and we love to say things about simplicity and nitpick on every little thing that we don't like about C++. Or rather, maybe not everybody does. To be fair, there's people in the Z community who actually are love C++, like there we go, Snectron in chat, who loves templates, and so we do have these debates. Like it's not everybody, but I think that that it's clear that there are some philosophical differences between, for example, Zig and C++. So I don't want to have like a debate over this. What I want is to teach a lesson to the people in the Z community, and have them listen to somebody tell why they like C++, and I would like for you to be, because not only you can make it work, like you can actually produce things, but you also do that in a settings where you could have used whatever you wanted, right? It was your choice for Serenity. You're not doing that for your job, and you care about having a good time while you develop SerenityOS. So I think you are the best person to tell us, a different point of view, and the point of view of somebody who can make C++ work for them.
Okay. Well, I guess what I like about C++ is that it has a extremely high skill ceiling, and it's very good for long-term programming. And I think what I mean by that is that if you are going to build something that you know is going to take more than 10 years to finish, then you want a tool that that remains relevant for that long, right? And I think you can C++ allows you to compartmentalize a lot of this complexity that people complain about. And what ends up happening if you get really good at C++, it allows your business logic to be very simple. And the complexity is all wrapped up in your abstractions. And I think that's sort of where I love C++ so much, because it allows me to build these extremely elegant abstractions over whatever I want. And in the end, my business logic, like my painting application or sound player or browser tab manager, or like these high level things that I'm working on, they end up really understandable and readable because they're built on this pile of really elegant abstractions. Like on the other side, you have these more simplicity-focused languages, which I feel are more short-term. They're good for short-term programming, where there's definitely a skill ceiling to simple languages. And what ends up happening in my experience is that the business logic becomes more complex because you cannot abstract as much as you would like, or as much as you would need to make the business logic simple. And I think that's sort of the trade-off here, in that simple languages are great for bringing new developers up to speed, for beginners in general, and they are very easy to demo and easy to attract people with. But I do think that once you hit the skill ceiling with simplicity-focused language, then it's a little bit rough to progress from there if you want to build like 10+ year software projects. That is my personal opinion about that, I guess.
I see. As I said, no comebacks for me, no comebacks from anybody in chat. Just take it to the chin. No, but jokes aside, I think it's a very reasonable point of view.
So
yeah.
I guess I should mention that, like, in my career, I have worked primarily on 15+ year projects, like projects that have been going on for a very long time when I started and still go on today long after I left. And it looks like they're going to keep going for at least another 10 years. And I think in that environment, I really came to appreciate just how strong and resilient of a language C++ is, if you have the right culture around it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, and all the teams I worked on had very strong unit testing culture and continuous refactoring culture. They are eager to get on new versions of the language and stuff like that. And I think if you have, like, all those things fall into the right places, then it is, in my opinion, a very, very strong language.
Right. You also have your own standard library, right?
Right. In Serenity, we do everything ourselves to minimize the effect of the outside and to have the most amount of fun possible. But also because I want to almost teach people about self-reliance, I guess, and accountability, like by building something where if somebody comes complaining about a bug, there is absolutely no situation where we have to look outside of our own code base. That's where I want to get to. So whatever the problem is, I can always say, well, you can fix this.
Yeah.
Or I can fix this, or whatever, right? And I think that creates a different type of developer. If you live in that environment for long enough, you become very hardened, and you realize that nobody is going to help you or take the blame. You can fix it yourself.
I see. I think the point about self-reliance is very interesting and very real. Like as a very small related example, so right now in Zig we don't have yet a full-blown tool that generates automatically documentation for your libraries. There is one that Andrew started, but it's experimental, it's incomplete. And so we don't have documentation for the standard library, or rather we only have this incomplete experimental version, which we write everywhere. It's incomplete, it's experimental. But the funny thing is that one thing that I learned really well when joining Zig is that it doesn't take that much to actually go in the standard library and read the freaking code. And there seems to be a barrier there where people see that there is, like, I know now that like the difference between the auto-generated docs and reading the source code is not that much. The auto-generated docs are like just slightly, it's just, I don't know how to say it. It's like, it's almost a role play. It's not that much better. And people seem to like, sometimes feel very off-put by the fact that there is no documentation from the standard library, while in fact they could very easily just read the source code, but it's, I don't know, it's, they can't.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, people have become a little bit pampered with the great documentation that tends to be available for, for mature projects these days. And that's nice for those projects, but if you want to participate in something like up and coming and not yet fully polished, then you just have to learn to deal with learning from source code, right? And I think it's an extremely important skill to develop for people, and I wouldn't rush into generating documentation just so that people can feel better about that. Like, I would rather just push them into the pool and watch them learn to swim, because they will.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I think that occasionally, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes we try to find a compromise. Sometimes we do tell people that, no, you have to learn this yourself. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so let's start talking about Serenity itself. So I have, let me bring up the references. I have here your YouTube channel, and there is this very funny YouTube video that you made a while ago that's a April Fool's video, spoilers for the people watching. But what I found this, by the way, masterfully done, because it's an April Fool's video, but it's an April Fool's video that hits the nail on the head and actually does a great job at reiterating your design decisions in an ironic way, but it's not just like fooling people and making people just confused. So basically in this video, Andreas shows, by the way, if you've never seen Serenity, this is how Serenity looks normally. It looks like a old school Windows, at least the desktop view. And what he said is that in this video that basically Serenity went for a old school Windows style with a terminal experience closer to Linux. And here he says, you know what, I got it wrong. We should actually do the opposite. Go for the Linux look and the Windows command prompt experience. And that's where he brings up a Windows terminal. Oh man! So, by the way, this does actually give me flashbacks of my youth that I might not be super proud of. So let's pull that away. But I think that was a great April Fool's video. So you
I
have
spent a whole day on that.
you did that. Time well spent, I would say. Time really well spent. So Windows looks, but POSIX, but in 3. So you don't have packages, but it's in 3. So I don't know. Can you tell a bit more about your general philosophy when it comes to the design of these things?
Yeah. So I grew up in the 90s, and my first exposure to computers was using office machines that my parents had access to. And I really appreciated how seriously they took me. Like, because when you're a child and you interact with adults, they always treat you as a child. And the computer was the first interaction that I had with anything in my life where I was treated like completely seriously. And it would just speak to me in this, I don't know, non-emotional tone, like file not found or whatever, like all these things. And I really liked that feeling that I was being taken seriously. And that really stuck with me. And I've always, since then, I've always felt that there was some kind of sweet spot there where interfaces were made for the professional, for professionals to get their work done. And they treated you completely seriously. They just told you if something went wrong, they just told you what went wrong. And they didn't try to be cutesy or anything like that. And the consumer market was very much irrelevant, or at most sort of a secondary afterthought for software companies. And I think in my mind, that's when software started going in a direction that I didn't enjoy. It was when they started trying to cater to the consumer market. So what I try to do with Serenity is sort of bring back those design sensibilities of the professional who wants to just get their stuff done. That's the target user. And in my case, that's me. I'm the guy who just wants to get my stuff done. And what is the stuff I want to do? Well, I want to write software. So I try to build a system that takes that completely seriously and doesn't try to fluff around with it. And that's sort of the big idea that everything comes out of. And then because I grew up with Windows, that's sort of what I model it on initially, because that's just what I think of as software that does that. But as we continue to build the system, we sort of discover that while it was really nice in many ways, it also had a lot of flaws and a lot of holes that have been patched up by more recent inventions in UI design and just in software development in general. So we're not shy to acknowledge that advancements have been made and integrate those. But the philosophy there is just take the user seriously, make the GUI productive for them. And the same thing goes for the command line. I really like the sort of the late 2000s Unix command line. And I specifically single out that time period because it was still the case that almost all configuration was text files that you could edit. And they were human readable text files, human editable formats, and everything was accessible through some kind of command. And almost everything was a shell script or something like that. And we've kind of turned into a different direction nowadays with a lot of Unix systems. And I think that's also something that's important for Serenity, to be really editable. And an example of that is how we, all of the information that is exposed by the kernel is in JSON, for example. So you can very easily look at it. It's structured JSON data, and you can look at it and work with it using any language that supports JSON. And we have, of course, first-class JSON support in our own C++ APIs. And I think there's that thing again where I just want the system to help me get my stuff done. I don't want it to get in my way or to be cute. I just want it to help me. And that's sort of where that comes in. So we have the extremely utilitarian or utility focused GUI, the utility focused command line. And then the last component that makes it all work is that we build everything together. So unlike most other systems that people are familiar with, we don't compose Serenity out of packages from around the web, but rather we just say, in order to function as a completely cohesive unit, we must build everything under one roof. So that's what we do. We build the kernel, and we build the desktop, and we build the web browser, and everything in between. And I think that's when you really start to see what is possible to do with these paradigms. And many people believe that the 90s desktop paradigm has been completely milked and there's nothing left, but I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of interesting things to discover about it still. I don't know where to go with this, so.
No, I think you were very on point in answering the original question. So, but are you 100% sure that you don't want like a secondary, newer, dumbed down control panel, or like there's this new idea which I think people lately, everybody must love it for sure. Like there's a new news thing with like ads and forecasts and whatever that goes into the start bar that Windows just added. Are you 100% sure you don't want any of these? They seem great ideas.
Right. I am 100% sure, yeah. I want my computer to do what I tell it to do, and I don't want it to guess. And I think that's something that sets me apart from the typical consumer user of today, because people are quite happy with computers telling them what to do. And I want to bring us back to a way of working with our computer where we tell the computer what to do. We're the boss. The computer just follows orders. And I think Windows is, like modern Windows is especially weird with that stuff, the things that you mentioned. But the web is largely like that as well. Like you keep being, like stuff is just shoved in front of you. And you're not really choosing so much as you're being entertained. And I don't know. I like my computer environment to be imperative, I guess, that I tell it what to do and then it does it. And then we do the next thing.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay, never mind. I'll pitch you new ideas the next Windows update that I'm subjected
Sure, yeah.
to.
If you have any great ideas, we can look at it.
By the way, I'm joking, but I haven't downloaded the update yet. I have a very ominous update icon that I'm secretly hoping that nothing bad happens, because otherwise this fucker will try to install an update, even though I don't want it to.
Yeah, that's another thing, actually. This culture that we have stumbled into of the continuous, unavoidable updates, where you no longer own your device, you don't own your software, and it just updates behind your back.
Yeah.
And you just have to sit there and take it. That's really weird. It doesn't sit right with me. And I don't think I would ever want to build something that does that to you. Like, and I do recognize the security properties of like automatic updates and how much value they have at scale. But if you build something where you consciously decide to not target the consumer user market, then those kind of concerns are suddenly not as large as they are for the consumer user market. Because power users, like if you say like we're only going to build this for power users, or in Serenity's case, we're just building it for ourselves. And I'm perfectly fine like rebuilding my system and installing an update manually. And I think anybody using that system is going to be fine with that as well, or at least that's what I'm assuming. And I think a lot of how software is built and designed and implemented these days is because of the target audience for it, which I feel I have sort of drifted away from the target audience of software. And there is room for a different type, a different class of software that targets a different market entirely. And I think maybe that's what I started doing with Serenity and what you guys are doing with Zig. It's like software for people who care about software in a different way. Like almost like software for people who are conscious of software being a thing. And it's not just some abstract thing that your computer throws up on the screen, but it's like, you know that it's code that was written by humans and it's compiled and
Yep.
distributed in these ways. And if you're aware of that, then what you're willing to tolerate from software changes, I think. Like the things that you and I tolerate from software is probably very different from what an average user tolerates. And yeah, I think by adjusting your target audience, then you can start to build something quite different.
Yeah. I think also it's a matter of incentives in the organizations that produces the software. Like I'm thinking of my experience with OBS. I'm using the open source version of OBS Studio, but I remember in the past some people told me, oh no, you should definitely give a chance to Streamlabs OBS because there's like 2-3 things that are, I guess, easier because they're integrated with the Streamlabs ecosystem. Now, it's yet again one of the situations where there's the open source project and a commercial entity that somehow attaches to the open source project. I already had my run-in with a something labs company, so I wasn't looking for a round 2. But despite that, I did install it, and I remember one day watching it auto-update at the start, and I remember thinking, oh shit, this thing is gonna try to auto-update and fail in a critical moment. I know for sure. 2 days later, boom, starts up, tries to auto-update, unhandled exception, whatever, doesn't start anymore. And that was the day where I threw it into the trash, and I decided that for sure I was just staying with normal OBS. And I say no to updates because if I don't have a reason to update OBS, I don't want to update it. It's fine as is. I understand that from time to time new features come out, and when I decided I want to use the new feature, fine, I will update. Until then, I'm fine with how the software is.
Yeah, right. I think that's an interesting point that we've been bullied into always auto-updating anything that is dangled in front of us. And if you question it, then they just say like, oh, well, it's security. And
yeah,
I feel like you're being force-fed a lot of unnecessary updates with security as an excuse. And it reminds me of this thing where Apple figured out that the people were not eating the security updates, the security broccoli. So they give them these emoji candy to wash it down with, and then they all eat it. And it's so funny to me when you see like what's new in this update. Well, it has like 100 security fixes in iOS, and we added a taco emoji, and then everyone updates. And it's so weird.
Yeah,
but it's genius. You gotta admit it's genius.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Although it feels so infuriating when you know the update is not even just that. Like it's not even that they are trying to add some sugar to sweeten the pill, but it's like it's complete useless garbage, and you have to take it. Especially when it's stuff they use for production stuff. Like I need OBS to be reliable. Like I don't care. And I'm looking at that icon. I know that Windows is trying its hardest now to find an excuse to blue screen and fuck me over. I know that.
Yeah.
Oh man! By the way, that's a very good point. Like I do complain a lot about these weird user experience that we are getting ourselves into lately, and yeah, you're making a lot of sense there. But yeah, but who will think of the children, and do you not care about security? These are the two things, right? Uh,
Right, very much so. I think they are one and the same. And
yeah,
it's really effective. It's really weird when you see. Um, it's like it's interesting. Also, if you look at these Linux mitigations things that happened in response to Spectre, I don't know how familiar you are with that stuff, but basically, in order to defend against these CPU level vulnerabilities, they had no choice but to introduce a bunch of kernel workarounds for these bugs. And all of those workarounds incur a pretty heavy performance penalty. So like everybody's Linux kernel performance took a nosedive, and just overnight you lost like, I don't know, 15-20% performance. And people were upset at first, but then everybody just kind of accepted it because security. Um, so it is interesting to see just what a like a mind-numbing poison the chant of security has become. Like it makes people swallow anything. Like the CPU that you paid like $1,000 for is now 20% less effective
yeah.
because security, right? Um, very strange.
Yeah. It you know, it did me give me when the all Spectre vulnerabilities came out. Now, do I remember it wrong that I think both AMD and Intel are affected to those vulnerabilities, but I believe that Intel had a higher performance hit. Do I remember wrong?
That might be the case. I don't know
Hmm.
how the different vendors were affected.
You know, because it reminded me of, like, if we are going back to the early 2000s, it reminded me when in the past it used to be, at least for a while, that new Intel CPU came out, new AMD CPU came out, and they were supposed to be kind of equivalent, but the Intel CPU always was a little bit better. And I remember when the Spectre vulnerabilities came out, and I kind of, for a moment, I thought, you know what? What if that's what's the reason why Intel was always a little bit ahead of AMD?
I mean, maybe it was like I think what we've learned is that CPU designers have been playing a little bit fast and loose with regards to timing attacks and the side channels that are available in the CPU. And it is interesting to see the response to this and how it almost feels like they're still like flopping around trying to figure out what to do even this many years later. Um, I mean, in terms of like recovering the lost performance, and I don't know really. Um, I also had the impression, as you say, that Intel was always like that little inch ahead of AMD, but that may also just have been you and I being marketing suckers
Could
and
be.
just
Could be.
because I don't think I ever that was never really like substantiated by some data that I can recall.
Yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, I do remember getting, at least for a period of time, all my tech information from like magazines.
Yeah, same here, right? So in retrospect, I'm not sure we were as informed as we felt.
Oh, okay. So somebody in chat is saying something interesting. Oh, right. AMD wasn't affected by Meltdown. Okay, so that's the thing. So Spectre was for everybody, but it was Meltdown that was Intel only. Thank you very much. Like I had a vague memory of that difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
I guess it turns out that speculation, like combining speculation and security, is pretty difficult. And
yeah.
maybe that was not, maybe they should have thought more about that ahead of time, but like you can always be clever in hindsight.
True.
I
Okay.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, I know, go ahead.
No, please. I don't want to
I
interrupt.
was just, I was just going to say that I do think I've seen some interesting talk about like what do we do about this situation? And maybe the solution is really to just accept that you cannot run code from two sources that don't trust each other on the same CPU. And if we just accept that and we start designing hardware around it, then maybe that's a way to get ourselves out of this mess. Of course, that creates a huge issue for those who sell virtualization services, for example.
Yeah.
But I do like when you have a situation like this, I do think it's important to take like to evaluate the most extreme solutions and then just take an honest look at them and then see, are they actually feasible? And okay, so well, can we scale them back a little bit to make them feasible? And like turning off all speculation on CPUs is an extreme solution that may work, right? And also just segregating code to CPUs that so that you don't have untrusted code running on the same CPU. But I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but I guess there are many people trying to work that out.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So like you have JavaScript coprocessor. That could be
right.
interesting.
Yeah, and JavaScript is a good example because everybody who uses a desktop computer, they want to browse the web probably. And can you really have two websites running their code on the same machine? Like what if one of them is malicious? And you're never going to be quite sure that your CPU doesn't have more bugs.
Yeah. You know what I'm thinking is that maybe for something like JavaScript where you always have the source code and you have to interpret it, maybe there could be techniques where you pay a performance seat, but you don't like turn these things on for the entire machine. You only turn these things on for the JavaScript code. So the idea would be that you are able to, I don't know, you make sure that all operations tend to be constant time, or at least you find which are the ones that are important to be constant time. Maybe that could also.
Yeah, that's a very interesting mitigation, like constant time execution.
Yeah.
But that has to be implemented at a very low level to be fully effective.
Yeah, in the virtual machine running JavaScript, you mean?
Right. And maybe even at the CPU level, like if you can make hardware guarantees about execution time. But this isn't a field that I'm particularly knowledgeable about, so just to let you know that I don't have great insight about it.
Yeah. I'm only remembering that we had similar discussions a while ago for the Zig standard library, because the idea was that for crypto, you care about constant time operations a lot. And there was some discussion on whether it would be possible to implement like a const time keyword where you can only use const time functions within a const time block, so that you can more easily catch mistakes.
Oh, interesting. I see. Okay, yeah, right. So you would sort of at compile time, you would determine that none of the inputs have like a user controlled length or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics. It might just be something that the compiler cannot check 100%. So it's something that you would have maybe to do yourself. But so like you mark a function as const time, so it's on you to make sure that that's the case. But then the compiler, what it does is just catch when you by mistake use a function that is not const time, or maybe some checking around for loops. So like maybe easy stuff. I don't remember the details, but it was one point of discussion.
Yeah, that does sound really interesting and should probably be investigated.
Yeah. Okay, so we went down a very interesting rabbit hole. Let's go back to Serenity a little bit. So, or maybe we could use like an excuse of compare and contrast some of the things that we just mentioned with how you do them in Serenity. But more in general, I'm interested in knowing. So you mentioned that you have an interesting take when it comes to the graphical style. But you do have POSIX. And also I remember that I've seen a few videos of you porting Linux software to Serenity, and it usually doesn't take much, right? Like if you have the subsystem implemented in Serenity, like, I don't know, you need 3D acceleration OpenGL, for example. As long as you have that, then porting Linux stuff tends to be trivial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, are there interesting situations, where you deviated from the kernel design or API design that Linux offers, or like things that are more unique to SerenityOS that other OSs don't have?
Not so much. It's rather almost like a mashup of all the things that I like from other systems, where I like a lot of things that Linux has. I like a lot of things that OpenBSD has. I like a lot of things that macOS has, but none of them have all the things that I like. So I just take them all and put them into Serenity. And that has been a very effective strategy for getting the things that I care about. So, for example, I really like the purgeable memory system that macOS has. So we have just brought that to Serenity, basically, where you can have areas of memory that have like live data in them, but the kernel knows that it can just take those pages for anything it needs at any time, and then the process that was using that memory will find out later that it was taken. And if it wasn't taken, then it can just carry on, but it will learn that something was taken from it. That's a fantastic mechanism that macOS and iOS uses, and Linux has been largely sleeping on, which is really sad, because like a lot of why, in my opinion, why macOS and iOS works so well with a lot of things, especially with regards to memory usage, is because they have sophisticated memory usage mitigation things. And I know that OpenBSD has a lot of great things that I wanted, so I just started taking those as well, like the Pledge sandboxing system, the Unveil file system sandboxing stuff. And of course, when you combine, like you mix and match things from different systems, then and then you try to port some random third-party thing like a game or something, you do end up having to tweak the little things, because most mature open source games, they will check like, is this a Linux system? Do this. Is this a free BSD? Do that. And we sort of fall somewhere in between all of these different things because of our mix and match style. So we have a bunch of APIs, but it's still a bit different. But if you've seen my porting videos, you can usually port pretty complex things in about an hour or so if you are like really familiar with the system and the process of doing that. And a lot of other people have had the same success as I have. So we've seen a lot of ports of random games, random Linux command line stuff. And I don't know, I don't even know how many ports we have today, but it's well over 100. And I guess I have a weird relationship with ports though, because I don't personally care that much about ports. It's more like I treat it more like a fun random thing to do if I don't feel like writing my own code that day. But ports will never ever be part of the base system in Serenity. They are just add-ons that we do for fun. And that's something that confuses many new people when they first find the system. They think, a lot of people, when they start the system, they ask, where's the package manager? And I have to say, well, there isn't one. And they say, oh, well, I'm going to make one then, so I can install all the things I want. And then they slowly realize that we don't have a package manager because we build everything ourselves. And if there's something that we really, really want to have on the system, it's so much more rewarding to build our own thing than to just port some, maybe very mature thing from the open source ecosystem, but it's not going to fit. And when you have a system where 100% of things just fit so nicely and they look so good together, everything is in a consistent style and consistent look and feel, and then you bring in this one Linux looking wart thing, and it ruins the whole thing. And and
Yeah,
I don't want to do that. And
I see.
that's yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I get it. It sounds really fun. It's challenging. The idea a bit daunting, maybe that you have to do things from scratch yourself. But I get it. Like you didn't mention earlier, but people that know Serenity also know that by virtue of everything being in the same tree, you can reutilize the same data structures that you use everywhere, like including the kernel, so that everything is very cohesive, and that's really cool. Helps with code bloat and a lot of other problems.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's something also I learned in big tech from working on WebKit, where at what seemed like a large scale to me then, but now it seems like such a small scale, but they have the same shared data structures for the JavaScript engine and for the web layout engine and for the browser and Safari. Like all of those are built on the same data structures. And I thought that was really neat. Of course, now we have a whole operating system built on the same data structures. So I've taken that to the extreme. But a lot of the same things that are awesome benefits of doing that, I still feel those. Like if you come up with a way to make like appending to a vector, if you come up with a way to make that faster or better somehow, then you can make that change, and it affects all the software. Like all the software now improves. There's nobody with their own janky custom vector anywhere. They're all using the same thing, and it incentivizes attention to detail in a way that I really like, because even the smallest detail improvement can be magnified to a great extent if you have such a huge rate of code sharing as we do.
Right. It seems a little bit to me that what would you think of like this joke way of describing Serenity as not in-house syndrome, the game?
Oh yeah, right. It's absolutely not invented here. Is almost more of a rule than a philosophy. Like we just don't bring in outside things. And
Yeah.
at the same time, we all recognize that there are outside things that are better than what we have. There are more mature components outside. There are more sophisticated things outside. There are, a lot of people ask me, why don't you just ... bring in Chromium? Or why don't you just bring in Firefox? Why don't you just bring in GIMP or whatever? And they don't get it. It's not about like rushing to the finish line and having a mature browser. It's about the journey and the joy of building that from nothing, right?
Right. And also,
then
you get all the update systems that these things rely on, and like you would bring in a cascade of things.
Right. Yeah. So it would seem so sad to me to get as far as we have and then ruin it by putting like Google auto update and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 5 versions of GTK, Qt, whatnot. An entire GNOME
Right.
subsystem. Right.
Yeah. No, so I like what we have going on. I think it really seems to resonate with people to just go on this journey together of building everything. And I think there are many of these narratives out there on places like Hacker News, for example, where people talk about like the complexity of things has gotten out of hand, and software has gotten so complex that you cannot recreate it anymore unless you are a billion budget big tech company. And I think that's not really true.
Yeah.
And there's this really defeatist attitude permeating the discourse. And I don't know what causes that, but I'm quite determined to just reject that narrative and help everybody understand that no, you can totally build all of these things. You just have to go one step at a time. And
One brick
it's
at a
not
time.
magic. Yeah, right. One brick at a time. There's no magic. It's just work. And
yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point. I have no idea what the full the full explanation of why we got to this point today, what that is. I'm sure there's like a plethora of explanations. Maybe some of it is that we are not particularly good at training new generations. So some of the expertise got lost over time. Maybe that's true. I mean, I'm thinking of my own experience in university. I wouldn't say that my university did the best possible job at training students. Maybe some of it is also not that bad, but it's an inevitable consequence of having tech something that is much more. I'm missing the English word for it, but like something that everybody can do today more than the past. Like you have a lot of people that get into tech not through university, not through other means, but like they just learn it themselves. And obviously at the start they don't have all the knowledge that somebody has after 5 years of university, and that's fine. And it's fine that more people join in. Of course, the consequence of this is that not everybody is a super skilled engineer. And I think some people resent that a little bit too much. But another explanation, which I think it's very interesting, is that I do think, though, that big tech not only has an interest, but I think has an active hand in pushing this narrative forward. I'm thinking of one concrete example of this. So this is not just hearsay. But if you look at the Supreme Court hearing between Oracle and Google, there was a lot of time spent by these companies, especially Oracle, stating that basically Google was infringing their copyright because Google made re-implementation of the Java standard library that was a one-to-one with what Oracle provided, so that programmers didn't need to like relearn a new naming scheme, and also they could just like have the same piece of JavaScript of Java code run on in both runtimes. Android and normal JVM, and I remember this company saying that, claiming that they invested so much money into this super innovative thing, the Java standard library. Ooh, and what a horrible thing that Google did by infringing their copyright and stifling innovation. And Google would say the opposite, that it would take so much money to... Anyway, they do want people to believe that it's just them that can do this stuff.
Yeah, and I think in particularly in cases like that, they want not just people to believe it, but they want tech illiterate judges to believe it.
Oh yeah, for
it
sure.
Seems like to me.
Yeah.
Because obviously, when a company is in a situation where they have to convince a bunch of judges who may not be, super up to date on all of these things, they're going to go all in on this narrative, and we all have to listen to it. But even so, like I would kind of expect people who are like hackers themselves to be more resistant to these narratives. But it does feel to me like even those among us who hack on stuff have started to fall for it a little bit. And I do think that's sad, and I do think people deserve to get some help breaking out of that mental prison.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially the people who so adamantly believe that you simply cannot build a browser. Like that's really my pet peeve of all these things. That whenever you bring up the idea of building a browser, there's always like 10 people piling on saying, nope, you just can't. You can't do it. And then if you show them, well, look what we've built already so far. And then they start to like move the goalposts. Yeah, like, yeah, but you can do that, but you can't build a JavaScript engine. And then you build one, and then they say, well, yeah, but it doesn't have WebGL.
Yeah.
And they just keep doing that. And you just, it's sad, really, but I think eventually we'll get to the point where these people can no longer keep moving the goalposts, and somehow that motivates me, I guess, in a weird, almost like petty way, that I just want to push these people to where their goalposts have nowhere to go.
But
so that's something we're working on.
Yeah. What about people that say that not only you cannot write your own browser, but what people that say that you cannot run your own browser on your machine, and they should run it in the cloud for you.
Oh yeah, this whole thing. Yeah, this is such a ridiculous thing to me that it's come to the point where you have a browser that is so bad that somebody's literally making a startup out of hosting it for you in the cloud. Um, and I don't know. It's
But the memes are
I
funny
try to,
though.
yeah. The
Like,
memes are funny, yeah. And I try to be nice about this, but I think that like this guy is like or this company that is making a cloud browser, they're like making money out of a bad situation, I think.
yeah,
They remind me a bit of like predatory lenders or whatever, that they like give people payday loans so that they can um, pay off their current things, and then they come back later and want payday themselves. Um, like, okay, I just get upset about how stupid this is. uh,
I get your point though. I agree because I cannot see myself ever paying a monthly fee to have somebody run a browser in the cloud for me because I don't have enough RAM, or because they also claim in the marketing material that like they solve fans in your laptop spinning too loudly. Like, I wouldn't fix that way, and the only people that I can think of that would agree that that's a reasonable solution is users that are not particularly tech literate.
Right. Yeah, and this is a product designed to just take money from those who are less tech literate. Anybody who understands what the problem is, they can look in their activity monitor or whatever and notice, hey, my Chrome processes are spinning at 99%. Maybe that's why my fans are going all in, right? And then they try a different browser and the problem goes away, and they don't have to pay $50 a month or whatever to have, cloud browser.
Yeah.
And that's what's so distasteful about this to me, is that it's clearly made to prey on those who are less tech literate. Um, and yeah, I just really don't like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Me neither. Okay, so do you think we should take a short break before we go into the second half?
Sure, yeah, that would be sweet.
Okay, so for everybody watching, we are roughly, let's say, halfway through. We don't have a precise timer, so I don't know precisely, but roughly speaking, I have still a few questions. We went over Andreas' background just a little bit. Then we talked about Serenity from a design and a little bit of a technical perspective. Next, I would like to ask him, once we come back, something that maybe is more Zig related, and also more things about more high level points, more rants about tech going wrong, because I guess that's where we're going. I mean, we do have a right to complain about these things. There's way too many of these things going on. So it's a 5-minute break. I'll see you soon, I guess. And we are back. So, okay, so by the way, for the people in chat, we are going to take questions at the end also. So don't worry. I've seen a few questions already in chat floating around, but we'll address them at the end. So, yeah, we were mentioning, Andreas, a few things about Serenity. So I have a question though. Okay, you mentioned that it's very nice for things to be built in tree and everything is very cohesive. And yeah, that works perfectly. And also that ports don't have this property and they have a bunch of like weird dependencies that you kind of don't want. And I can totally see myself using Serenity. Everything is so nice and tidy, and then you try to open something that loads a bunch of libraries that only the thing uses, which are like bad duplicates of what every other library is using, weird graphical styles and stuff. Now, here's the thing though. So is it possible? Do you think it makes sense? What can people do if they want to develop software for Serenity? Like, let's say in the future, I'm on Serenity and I want to write software myself, but I'm not using C++. And I'm asking this for a friend, by the way. So, is there a way for me to write nice software if I'm not using C++?
At the moment, not really. It's a little bit like iOS, that you kind of have to use the platform libraries, or make web content, which we don't support as well as we do C++, but one day. But currently, there's no story for other languages, and it's simply because all of our libraries for talking to our services are C++. But if the language that you're using is capable of binding to C++, then we don't have a problem. Of course, many languages are not, and there's no real goal to implement any kind of C API for any of this. But I do think that something that we might end up building in the future is perhaps metadata about our APIs.
Mm-hmm.
That would be so strong that you could build code generators from it that would build the bindings for you. But it's not really something that we have a plan for or anything like that. If you don't care about GUI, then you can very realistically build against our C library, which is just a standard C library, right? So command line apps you can totally build. But if you want to build a GUI app in a different language, you're a little bit out of luck.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
That's just a fact of the situation.
Okay. Okay. Let me check my list of questions. What else do we have in here? Okay, so we have been complaining about out updates and recent trends in software. So what do you think is, like, can you put a finger on what exactly do you think it is that we kind of lost from the, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, that it's not there anymore?
So I think what was lost was the focus on the professional as the primary user of a computer. We went from a time where computers were made and designed and built for professionals to accomplish their jobs. And then we went into a transition period almost of the home user, which was, the professional now has a computer at home that they can use and they want to do some personal stuff on it. It was a very brief period. And then I think we sort of accelerated from that period into the consumer user period where we are now, where most people who use computers today are not really home users in the way that that perhaps they were originally, but rather they are just consumer. The software is optimized to help you consume content and to help you spend money. And I think, in my mind, the thing that we lost that I care about is just the focus on getting stuff done, focus on the professional.
Yeah.
And even if you look at software that is specifically for professionals, like Microsoft Office, it looks less professional today just because of general industry trends, even though it still has no consumer application. It's just been a victim of everything around it going that way. I think, for example, a mentality that happens really only because we got into software is this like iterating on the design of things for the sake of changing the design of things. Like you change the design of things in order to make new versions more attractive to people who are, dazzled by change. So they come up with a new look for the windows and a new look for the toolbars, and they say, oh, here's a new version. Look at all these changes. And people are like, ooh, it's new. And I think that way of thinking was just irrelevant when computers targeted professionals, because if you just want to do your stuff, you don't care about the toolbars looking different. You just want them to have your tools. And I do think that's something that we've lost, even though it is something that we've gained, like we way of making software. Really, it's more like a loss.
Yeah.
We lost focus, I guess, and the willingness to commit to something over a long period of time.
What do you think of the argument that part of it is also because somehow companies have become more efficient at not really more efficient, it probably is the wrong word, but like tech companies grew in size, and they started employing more non-technical people that brought in like new techniques to keep to extract more value from the users and keep people more engaged in artificial ways. Like I'm thinking, for example, that a lot of these new trends, they probably seem to me the result also of extra sophistication from the companies when it comes to fancy business models. Like, and that also has negative impacts on professional tools. Like I'm thinking of Adobe. Now Adobe is out cloud subscription, like what the hell. And also like the constant updates, or also like the redesigns that you're mentioning. The redesigns, keep people interested on one end, and you could also argue that on the other end, keep the people that think about these things employed. Because obviously,
right.
if you didn't have to do a graphical refresh every 6 months, maybe your graphical side, whatever department, would have a few people less in there. And I'm also thinking like of OBS, like the ones that I mentioned earlier, the Streamlabs version, like which it's for professionals, maybe not professionals as in old school professionals, because Twitch streamers, maybe they're not the most professional workforce on the planet, but it is a production tool, and it also is 100% affected by these new weird policies. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think I would actually say that Twitch streamers are perfectly professional, just like any other profession, because I think the separation that I would like to make is I saw somebody who's saying fucking plebeians using computers, and I think it's not about the division between like professionals and home users. I think it's between professionals and home users. Those are all in a group. They all just want to use their computer as a tool, and then there's the people who want to use their computer for entertainment, and that's where I separate the two groups. And I think that because of the way the industry has evolved, the user base has always been viewed as a single big chunk. But I think there is real value in looking at whether we can separate these two groups. And I think starting to view the computer more as a tool again is valuable. So that's I guess that's what I would like to do. And then I forget what the first part.
Wait, Andreas, I think you cut off in the last like 3 words that you said. Can you double check your mic?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I didn't remember what the first part of your question was.
Okay. I guess the first part was about well, the second point was just about what do you think of the idea that now the companies have like a bunch of branches that are non-technical. These branches have to justify their existence, right? So maybe in the past the companies were smaller and technical people had more weight into the decision making of things, but now you have a bunch of middle managers. You have the marketing team who needs the extra engagement. So, and they keep making decisions like, I'm thinking of Twitter, for example. I have Twitter. I don't have notifications on Twitter. I will never enable notifications on Twitter. And Twitter can't stop bothering me about it. Like sometimes I open it up and there's one new notification. I click on it and the notification is not an actual notification. It's the freaking app bothering me that it says that it needs for me to enable notifications. Like I know I don't want it. God damn it. And I know that this is a decision that it's not the engineers that said, oh yeah, we should totally annoy the user on a regular schedule about this. It's definitely somebody else.
Yeah, right. So that's one of the big fundamental sad things about big tech is that it is so much about metrics, right? About metrics driven product development. And it's hard to find engineers who enjoy that sort of thing. And I think it creates a lot of perverse incentives for companies, like you say, to convince people to enable notifications. And when you look at such a large scale as they do, when you look at like millions of users and you say, well, if we give people 2 pop-ups annoying them about turning notifications on, then 13% of people actually go and turn it on. And they don't, like, that's enough for them to say, oh, shit, we should totally do that, right? And they don't think about that accumulating irritation that it creates in people. Or they do, and I'm sure they have 13.
And I don't hear you anymore. Sorry.
I'm getting too far away from my mic. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
No, I was saying that I think they probably have a metric for annoyed users as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They probably weigh these things against each other just like any other data. That like 2% of people are irritated, 13% of people enabled notification as a result of our irritating campaign. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And there's a type of person who excels in this type of environment, and I'm not that type of person. I don't think you're that type of person. We don't really get along with those types of people.
Yeah.
But those type of people make companies a lot of money, so they keep hiring them, and you get what you get. And
did you experience that? Did you experience that at Apple?
Not to a great extent, me personally. I did see other people get roped into building features that that were like not necessarily in the user's interest, and I could see that they were having less fun at work because of that. But that was relatively rare. Like I would say that Apple as a company has it's in a pretty interesting position that they are much less reliant on money than so many of the other big tech companies. So they are free to build things for users a bit more often than some of their competitors.
Yeah.
but there were some sad things people had to work on, and it's always sad to see that. Um, yeah, I guess you've experienced some of that yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the problem is that there's like when your audience expands, if you want to maximize I guess profit slash engagement, you kind of have to do something for the average of the population. And I think if your population is professionals and non-professionals, people with vastly varying degrees of tech literacy, then obviously people that programmers, developers, and professionals tend not to be the target, and so then all the evil things that companies come up that impact negatively the average user, but maybe you could even say that that you could even make a point that the average user maybe doesn't realize it, so at the end of the day doesn't even care much, because maybe they don't have a sophisticated taste for software like we do, which I mean we should have, given that that's our job. Then obviously we are extra annoyed by that, and we are a smaller population, so we end up basically having to. We cannot expect them, I guess, to do nice things for us past a certain point.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because I think as much as you can easily alienate tech users, that is dangerous to do that.
True.
At least in the past, like I know that my family started using Firefox 15 years ago or whatever, because I kept recommending it to them, and they started using Chrome years later because I recommended it to them. So I do think that like us nerdy power user people, we have some influence, or at least in the past we had some influence on what average users were using. I do wonder if like tech companies have observed that this avenue of influence is no longer as relevant as maybe they have more of a direct line to the average user. These people just follow the recommendations from the App Store and stuff like that.
That's a good
I don't
question.
know.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be nice to prove them wrong. You know, it would be nice to find a way of somehow influencing something so strongly that they have to realize that, yeah, alienating programmers and tech literate people is not a good idea. I'm thinking of a scene that I was part of when I was in my big tech job, because I remember at one point there was the discussion about, you know what, it's super relevant, a discussion about blog posts, on whether how technical should the blog posts be. And the accusation moved against me was that I was, according to them, going for blog posts that were too technical, and that I should focus more on tutorials and super basic how-tos. Because the argument was that, well, there are much more people in need of a basic tutorial on a, you know, super bare bones how to I don't know, drink from a glass, basically. We're talking about that level of complexity. And and these are like, it's a giant population compared to people that would maybe care more about I don't know, complex transactions in a database, something like this. And there was another moment when metrics came up in the discussion, and I would say one thing that, or actually, let me first finish this story. So what I ended up arguing was that there's a problem with just looking at like Google Analytics when it comes to this stuff, because everybody that is past a basic point of tech literacy will have an ad block installed and will not show up in your Google Analytics metrics. Seems obvious to me, But that's of course a problem because, well, yeah, you're claiming that there are these phantom people that can't be seen in the matrix. How can I trust you? So that was interesting. And also another interesting thing is that I really think that this data-driven fade is a big problem because the people that look at this data are not qualified to look at data. Like I'm sorry, but I'm thinking of my bosses and some of my colleagues in the past. I was under marketing. None of these people knows how to read metrics. I'm sorry, they don't have the qualification. Like the amount of blatantly wrong conclusions that some people claim they would be able to obtain from data, like some were absurd, and I think that it really hurts software development, this idea of following metrics, because they don't even do it in the right way very often.
Yeah, and this just gets me thinking about I like to look at data, but I think I'm not emotionally capable of it sometimes because while I can understand the meaning of data from, for example, from my YouTube channel, if I look at the analytics for a video, I find it very difficult if a video does particularly well and gets a lot of views, then it's very difficult emotionally to not want to like repeat that success. And I had one, for example, where I Diablo or an open source version of Diablo to Serenity, and people really liked that video, got a lot of views. And then after seeing the data, I had a really hard time like not looking for other things to port immediately because I thought like, oh well, I want to like ride that train again. And I think it's not just about like statistical competence, but also like when we get a taste of success, I think we're emotionally wired to desire more of it. Like we get hungry for more of that cake, right? I certainly see that in myself. And so for that, like it makes it a little bit harder for me to judge these conclusions that people draw. Because I don't know.
Okay, I can totally see that happening. I would say that there wasn't really, I'm pretty confident that this specific emotional part wasn't my case because the marketing team never got any real win in that sense. So they never had any metrics to be proud of. Anyway, I might be too negative, but that was my impression. But I can totally see it. Like you get like a huge spike, something goes viral, then of course you kind of want to do more of that. Have you ever watched Veritasium? There's a video from Veritasium on YouTube about this specific problem for YouTubers.
I've watched Veritasium, some of his videos, but I'm not familiar with this particular one.
This was a very interesting video because it was about like the burnout that some YouTubers experience. So maybe this, I'm sure this doesn't affect me because first of all, I don't consider myself a YouTuber. Like I do YouTube, but that's not my core point. You have a much more successful YouTube channel, so maybe this might interest you more or not. You tell me. But the idea was that if your main thing is getting success on YouTube, like full-time YouTubers do, then they have to fight against this invisible algorithm that keeps changing. And so they basically try very hard to see a pattern of what becomes popular and is successful on YouTube. But then they always get it wrong because the target keeps moving, and because YouTuber engineers keep touching the dials, etc., etc. And so they experience burnout because they basically trying to chase an understanding that they are always unable to get. And so they pour a lot of effort into making something that they feel like should be a huge reward for them, and they constantly get disappointed by that.
Yeah, I get that. I don't really consider myself either. Thing is just like I'm just building the Serenity operating system, and YouTube is a way for me to communicate my vision for it. And I think it's almost unique in that I can't think of another project that has that like level of or that type of communication from its original author. At least not not to the extent that I have made like 800 videos or something at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't consider myself a YouTuber. I just have a channel. Um, but at the same time, I do see some of those effects of this algorithm, right? Because my videos do sometimes get recommended, and I get like 10,000 people showing up on a video from 2 years ago. And I wake up in the morning and I have 100 comments, people asking questions about things I don't remember saying. It's a
Yeah.
bit bizarre. Um, so I can totally imagine that if this is your livelihood, that must be like really confusing,
Yeah.
like almost insane in a way. To you're playing a game, but you're not allowed to know the rules.
Yeah.
Um,
Um.
and
Yeah.
yeah, no, it seems like that's how a lot of these content platforms and platforms choose to conduct themselves, because I can see their side of it too, that they have all of these users, and if they were to publish how the system works, then you would have all these people playing the game and like
Yeah.
using it to get an advantage. So they have to obfuscate the rules. They have to hide how the system works. And people are saying my audio is bad.
You had slight cutoffs, not bad enough to make you like make it impossible to understand what you're saying. But I think it has to deal with the threshold that you have in Discord.
Okay, it's set to auto, so let me just set it to like always on, and then you have to listen to the hum in my background.
I think it's fine.
Okay, we'll just do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that that it is interesting that companies choose to play this way, but I don't see how they could do it in any other way,
Yeah. True.
because so many people would game the system if they knew the rules.
Yeah. This makes me think also that maybe it's not exactly the same, but we also have, I think, a somewhat similar problem in open source. I don't know if you saw recently there was this, I think it was a GitHub issue that got at the top of Hacker News, where the title was "Sorry, I failed you," and this was like an issue opened by a open source maintainer who was saying that he felt like he failed the community by not being present. And I think also in a way, open source, the way it works today, it tends to abuse. Maybe not. Nobody's doing that like on purpose, but there are some people that have a personality where they want to please others, and they kind of get trapped into this never-ending treadmill where they they keep doing things, and the public keeps asking for more, and they feel like they can't get off.
Yeah, I saw that post too. And I could relate to that guy a little bit sometimes, because I do get a lot of requests for Serenity, but I guess I'm a bit fortunate that the project has a quite high barrier in terms of like the skill level required to engage with it meaningfully. So the people that do tend to come to the project already are like quite experienced developers usually. Um, but even so, like it does weigh on you, because there's more requests than you can ever really respond to. And um, like for me personally, like after I quit my day job and started doing this full time, I do feel like almost guilty now sometimes that I don't get back to everybody, because now I have more time. I could theoretically spend all day getting back to everybody, but like I don't know. If I start doing that, then I still won't have time to do other stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it's it is a really strange thing, this whole switching to full time. Like because I know I have to introduce it incrementally, or I'm gonna screw it up. So if I try to go all in with everything, then I know I can't do that. So I'm figuring that out. But it was a depressing post, that one that you mentioned, and I think a lot of people end up burning out because they are eager to please, and it can be really overwhelming and exciting when people like your project and they use it and they are really happy with it. They just want this one little thing, right? Everybody just wants this one little thing. And the first, I would say the first 100 times that that happens, it's really fun because somebody's using my thing. You know, of course I'm going to help him make it work even better for his use case. Um, but when you've done that 100 times and then Mr. 101 comes along, then it's rough, you know.
Yeah.
And you look around, you look out on the street, and there's like an endless line of people. So yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Like, have you ever experienced that yourself?
I personally think I know the secret to beating this problem from start to finish. So okay, here's the deal. I'll tell you what it is, but then I'll ask you to tell me something similar that I don't know the answer to, and you might know about addiction. So here's my solution to this. I think that the problem in part is that really you should just be more selfish. And I think that selfishness is, in the right measure, can be a very good thing for software development because, like in my case, for example, and I think you could say that there is a little bit of selfishness in Serenity because you mentioned multiple times that you're building something for yourself, right? That you like, and I think that's great because I think that you wanting to have a good experience is the starting point to be able to give a good experience to somebody else. If you're not able to produce a good experience, design a good experience for yourself, you're not going to be able to do it for somebody else. And for example, that's how I design things. And I think that also has it's also a solution when it comes to open source, like well, let me talk about YouTube first. Like for example, in my case, I haven't done a perfect job at explaining this to my audience, but yet another reason why I don't think of myself as a YouTuber is because I know that YouTubers spend a lot of time designing, editing their videos. They spend giant amount of time. It's not easy. It's non-trivial. Like somebody in the past said that I should work more to make shorter content. I have issues with that from a creative standpoint, but aside from that, it's also the fact that it would take too much time to do a good job at reducing a hour-long video to, I don't know, a 20 minutes long video that doesn't lose meaning, and I just don't want to do it. The long story short is that I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do that for you. So I think that coming from a perspective where you want to put yourself in a group of people that you want to have a good time, that's probably a very healthy way of addressing all of these things. Like if you're not in that group, you're gonna burn out, maybe even by definition.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And that the key to the whole thing is to be selfish and to um, remember why you're doing it, right? What was the original reason that you were doing it? Um,
Yeah.
and I, I really agree with what you say about YouTube. At the same time, because I do get like not complaints, but like requests from people that, oh, could you make a like an 8-minute version of this or whatever. Sometimes I make these videos where I sit in the car and I talk about something, and I've gotten people messaging me saying, I really like what you said, but could you like say it in 5 minutes so I can send it to my friends?
Yeah.
And
And maybe they mean well, but
yeah, they do mean well, but I don't want to do that
yeah.
because if I try to like, I can't convey the same things in 5 minutes. You need to
Need time. I agree.
You-
You know, there's a quote, which I don't remember the precise quote, but I think it's attributed to Pascal, who said, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. It takes time to make things short without losing meaning. Like it's generally super hard.
yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Um, but even so, like I still managed to find some success on YouTube, so
Yeah.
I do okay. Like I'm not trying to be a million sub channel, you know. So
Hmm.
I'm happy to target the niche audience that is willing to watch some guy program for 2 hours, um, because I'm a member of that audience myself. Like I regularly watch other people program for 2 hours or talk about stuff while drinking coffee. Um, and I think Serenity, the whole Serenity project is the same way, that it's made by me for me, and that attracted a bunch of people who want to make something for themselves as well. And that's almost what unites us, is that we are not trying to build something for other people. Like it doesn't matter what use cases exist out there. Like if they're not in our bunch, then they're irrelevant. Um, so it does create an interesting dynamic. Um, for example, when people make feature requests, then unless that person is already actively working on the system in some way and like has patches in the system, then we usually just close the request, because you know we're not trying to make it work better for you, random outside person.
Right.
Like no offense to the outside person, but like if you want the system to do something, then come and do it yourself. We'll be happy to bring you up to speed on how everything works. Um, and I guess what I'm discovering over the last 2.5 years is that there is very much a market um, for a subculture that works this way instead, that doesn't try to accumulate as many users as possible, that doesn't try to fit all the use cases and everything, and doesn't try to make money as much as possible. Rather, just does what it wants just because.
I agree.
Uh,
That's a good point. And I think it goes back to your original definition of having good taste. I think that, yeah, fits very well. Um, yeah. So yeah, to conclude, my side of this argument was that, yeah, I also think that it's the same for open source. I think there are a few people that are eager to please and they end up being abused by the resulting interactions. Again, maybe nobody does that like with ill intent, but the result is that you have these people that burn themselves out in open source, and they make bad decisions, and they expect a reward for certain things, and the reward then doesn't end up coming, because that's not how this thing works, and they get super disappointed.
yeah, and you get death by 1,000 bug reports,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. True. That said, I've never been at the. I mean, I'm part of the Zig Software Foundation, but I've never been individually at the helm of a hugely successful project, and that's also partially because of my attitude. So I would say that it's trade-offs, there are limits, so that's fine. So I mentioned earlier a question about addiction. So if I go to your Twitter profile, so let me bring up the web browser, and so on your Twitter profile, the first thing you say is recovering addict, and I think this also has something to do with the name of the OS, right? SerenityOS. What can you tell me about this?
So since I was a teenager, I've had a very bad relationship with alcohol and drugs. And it was the focal point of my life until 3 years ago. And I've had to learn entirely new ways of approaching everything in life in order to get out of um, that being like the focus of my life. And um, the reason I put it first is because it is just the way that I end up thinking about myself, and it's almost like a defense mechanism to prevent this from ever happening again, from ever slipping back into that. that the way that addiction controls you and keeps you in it is that um, it it makes you keep it a secret, and it makes you think of it as like, oh, it's this little cool thing that I have going on that nobody needs to know about. And that's why I put it front and center where I identify myself on Twitter, just as a way to help myself remember and um, not have any not have any back door where I could slip out. Instead, I just tell everybody that I have this problem. And I guess what can I tell you about that? I think I think that it is something that very many people deal with, and very few people um, have sufficient tools available to them to avoid it becoming a problem, because it's something that's not really like, unless you have this problem in your family, it's not really something that healthy families talk about.
Hmm.
And um, I think it's a problem that we almost try to keep under wraps a little bit. And maybe you have like your uncle who drinks too much, and then you don't invite him for Christmas. But nobody talks about like what the real problem is and how you can help him. And I don't know if I have a solution for that, but what I learned about it was that the way to get out of it is that you just have to talk about it and tell everybody what your problem is, that you cannot put the drugs down, you cannot put the beer down, um, and you're afraid of what would happen if you continue like this, because you feel your body starting to fail in ways that are not normal for a 30-year-old person, or for a 25 or for a 20-year-old, and it's just going to get worse. So I don't know. We just kind of slipped into that question, so um, I wasn't really prepared with a clever answer. But
Sorry, no worries. I think that's a great answer. Um, so, well, going forward with a selfish attitude, I can tell you that in my personal case, alcohol and drugs don't really do much for me. I don't know, I just don't like it enough to for it to be a problem at all. But but I know that I don't have a particularly strong will. Like, it's not just because I'm resistant to addiction. It's just that these are not the things that I'm addicted to. I think that I, and probably a lot of people watching this, if I were to say what is my problem, I would say that I do spend a probably unhealthy amount of time in front of the computer. I mean, it's a very interesting box, but especially with the pandemic, probably always being inside doesn't help. And I do know that, like, really, that's all I do all the time. And also, probably everybody, like, you watch the screen while you're working, and then you go back home and you reward yourself with some more screen. uh, which is an oversimplification, of course, because you're watching different things. Like, it's information, and information is interesting by definition. But so here's the question, and actually, maybe I'll throw another thing into the mix. And also, when it comes to substances, I think that the one thing I'm addicted to is sugar. Like, this seems like this is my bane of existence, and why I know that I have weak will when it comes to this stuff. I drink Coca-Cola. I want it. I drink a full bottle one day. I have an awful night of sleep, and then the next day, and I regret it the next day. Then 2 days later, I want more. Do you have any practical advice for people that don't have, a big problem with addiction, where they are forced one way or another to seek professional help, but they have these small-ish problems in their life that they just can't get rid of?
sure. So I think in some ways what you describe is extremely common, and it is in some ways a harder problem to solve than the more visible drug addiction or alcohol addiction, because somebody being addicted to sugar or eating, or you know, sitting at the computer, like these sort of lighter vices, um, it doesn't get taken as seriously, maybe. Um, but they are all symptoms of the same, um, like mental, um, I don't want to say like deficiency, but like there's something that's going wrong in your head when you get yourself into these loops, right? Where
Yeah.
you do something that hurts you, and then um, you get some kind of weird pleasure out of it, so you do it again and again anyway. And I think the main advice I would have for somebody who can't get out of the loop is that moderation does not really work. Like you cannot learn to moderate. If you have this tendency to get into the addictive loop, then moderation is not the solution for you. Moderation is something that gets preached about by people who have moderation. People who are able to do these things in moderation. They tell you, "Oh, just do it in moderation. Just have a little bit of sugar. Just put the screen away." Right? Um, if you find yourself in these loops continuously or repeatedly, then what you want to do is to just go cold turkey without it. Um, and I think that's really the only reasonable way to approach it. And that will also like give you finally some time away from the thing that is hurting you. And what happens then, I don't know. It's different for everybody. But I think you cannot begin to uh, get out of these things if you are always um, like letting yourself engage with it a little bit. So if you have a problem with sugar and Coca-Cola, for example, I would really recommend just going cold turkey, drinking only water. And I know that it sucks. Of course it sucks. But by doing that, you will put yourself into a completely new space where you will be able to maybe find a new way for something that works for you.
Hmm.
But I remember hearing this advice a million times. Just drink in moderation. Just do drugs at parties. Um, and my friends could do that, but I couldn't.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it's the same with like I used to be very heavy in the past, and I was constantly eating candy. I was eating cheesy pizza several days a week, and I felt like I was trapped in some kind of cycle with that. I couldn't get out of it. And the thing that I finally realized was that I can't do this in moderation. I gotta stop. Like I just have to cut these things out of my life, and that's the thing that finally worked. To just say, I am somebody. When I went to rehab, the therapist that I worked with there, he taught me about this way of thinking about it as an allergy. That I am allergic to alcohol. I'm allergic to drugs. I'm allergic to some type of food that I can't stop eating or whatever. And once you start seeing it as an allergy, then you realize what that means for you. It means that if you take this in, it will hurt you.
Hmm.
And that was something that really stuck with me, this way of thinking about it. Accepting that, yeah, maybe other people can do this, but you can't.
I see. Um, Makes sense. I think the first step into my journey to like distance myself from sugar a little bit started, I think, with coffee. I've always drank coffee with a good amount of sugar in it, and I remember like not being able to drink coffee without sugar. Like it was unthinkable. Maybe I tried once, like just for fun, but like it was this not just disgusting, but it wasn't disgusting. Like the problem was that it was disappointing. It's like drinking tea without sugar if you've never done it. It's your brain. The moment you take a sip, your brain starts thinking, "What the hell? What is this wasted opportunity? I was supposed to get a good chunk of sugar right now, and you just took a sip, and there's nothing in there. What the hell?" And I think that's the moment where I realized that yeah, that's definitely not just my personal preference, but something different that is influencing the way I see this thing. So yeah, basically to me what worked. Now I only drink coffee without sugar. So I do still drink Coke and my fight is not over yet, but at least when it comes to coffee, when I mentioned earlier when I went to Singapore, and there, compared to Italy, no big surprise there, I guess, but the general culinary culture is less connected to carbohydrates, and that helped me a lot. And so from after I came back, and now it's just coffee without sugar, and I'm actually realizing that coffee with sugar, to me now, is disgusting. It's overly sweet. I can't drink it anymore. It feels weird. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. I used to drink coffee constantly, like 5, 6 cups a day. But I I quit coffee at the same time that I quit drugs and alcohol. I bundled it together with that because I had just as big of a problem with coffee as I did with any of the other things. So I don't drink
Hmm.
coffee or cola anymore. And that's why I started drinking tea, is the only caffeinated thing I drink now. Um, because it's a bit boring and it doesn't invite you to drink just copious amounts so easily.
Hmm.
Uh, and I still catch myself sometimes thinking that like, oh, I'm just gonna have more tea. Um, but it's just not so sweet that you can just throw it back, right?
Yeah.
And that's something. I guess that's something I would add to what I was saying earlier. That going cold turkey on something doesn't mean that you can't have a substitute. It's just that the substitute has to be um,
Less damaging.
less damaging. Exactly. And I think when it comes to something like beer, for example, I know there's non-alcoholic beer, but I do think that that's a really bad idea for like alcoholics to drink non-alcoholic beer because even if it doesn't have alcohol, you're still like tripping up all of those mental processes um, that think they're going to be drunk in 5 minutes. And I think it's better not to fuel that engine. So I am a bit cautious about tea, but it has been working for me so far.
Hmm.
Um, but it sounds like you're on track with your thing, like figuring out what works for you and like making adjustments as you go.
Yeah.
That does seem pretty healthy. And the way that you're able to talk about it, I think that's what tells me that you're on the right track. Because if you can talk about it, it means that you're making progress. If you can't talk about it, that means that it's something that you're like, then you're on the dark path. Uh,
Yeah, the way I think about it is that I very clearly remember in the past when people would tell me that, the usual things that like moms and parents say, oh, sugar is bad for you. And I used to drink very, like, I loved sugar. I mean, now I know that that's not exactly it, but I used to think that I really love sugar. And when people told me that I should probably like go more easy on that, my thinking was that no, they're wrong because that's actually my personal preference. It was like the coffee thing that really made me realize that yeah, no, there's something weird here. It's that actually turns out that I do prefer coffee without sugar. Another interesting experiment was it's not exactly related, like it's not exactly the same thing. Let's say it's tangential. Is toothpaste. I one day, for some weird reason, bought a salty toothpaste, and it was by mistake. Yeah, it's disgusting, right? But I hated it. But here's the thing: why am I convinced that toothpaste has to be sweet? Why can it not be salty?
Good
And
question.
yeah, I started using it on purpose, disgusted by it every single time I did it. But now I am so suspicious of this opinion that I want to fight back. Why am I convinced that toothpaste has to be sweet? And so I think that's like a different attitude where you start questioning, you start realizing that some of your beliefs are not exactly yours, and that's, I think, for me, was the starting point into analyzing these things a little bit.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I had not thought of that. Um, and my mother uses a non-sweet toothpaste, which I always make faces at when I see it. But maybe she's onto something.
Maybe it's just a random thing, but then I think that also helped me understand how marketing can be very effective, because marketing can influence your opinion a lot, and developers tend to think that they are immune to marketing, but that's not exactly true, because it's like programs in the matrix. When you can point out that that's a program in the matrix, it's only when the program is malfunctioning. So you can point out marketing efforts, clumsy marketing efforts, but when they're clumsy, when they are sophisticated and effective, you don't see it as marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, I think this is especially noticeable when some company does something that appears like they look clumsy and stupid.
Mm-hmm.
You think they don't know that, right?
I've seen some marketing people being clueless, so I can think of some examples where it's just like the wrong person in the wrong place. But sometimes, yes, sometimes you're not who they are trying to convince, and it doesn't matter if what they're doing works on you or not. It has to work on somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a better way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever played Secret Hitler?
I have not.
Oh man, you should. Have you seen that we played it?
I did, yeah, but I didn't
Yeah.
follow it enough to understand what was going on.
So in Secret Hitler, it's the same thing. Sometimes when you're part of the bad guys, you want to convince one key liberal, and you don't care if what you're saying compromises you in the eye of somebody else. They already suspect you. They're not valuable to you, so you know that what you're doing makes them even more suspicious. But that's not your goal. Your goal is to convince somebody else. And I always kind of love when at the end of the game somebody says, "Oh, I really knew that you were a fascist," and the answer is yes, but that doesn't make you smart. I'm sorry. That was the plan all along. It's a very nice game. I recommend it. Well, something to do maybe in the Serenity community, if you all feel like it. I think I'll try to organize games for the Z community.
Yeah, why not? That does sound like
Would you like to join?
something
Maybe.
that might be interesting. Maybe,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay, so let's try to go back on track.
Okay.
Holy shit. Yeah. Time is flying. So we kind of lost a little bit the ability to really take computers as a serious tool to do things, and that has to be useful instead of just being entertaining. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. So so you for Serenity you went for a old school look, and you are following POSIX, which are two, let's say, old things that maybe today are, especially the Windows looks, are not really in vogue anymore. But you are arguing that they shouldn't be thrown away because it's some good things that we kind of lost, which is fine. But that said, like, how do you stop yourself from being stuck in the past? Because I think that there is a very high risk of just saying, oh, let's go down nostalgia lane, and computers used to be much nicer, and Commodore, and I was born with BASIC, and like, great, but that doesn't help me in 2021, and certainly doesn't help new generations. What do you say?
Okay. So, well, the first thing I say is that the Serenity project is definitely not about getting stuck in the past, because we use modern tools, modern languages, modern hardware, etc. Like, it's not a system for old computers, and it's more about recognizing that at some point in the past, I felt that we were on a good track, and then the train derailed from my perspective, and I just want to turn back the clock and start a new timeline from that point, and see if we just go back to there and then evolve from there once again, knowing what we know now, how can we do things differently?
Right.
And it's a bit like loading a save game after you've practiced on the boss a bit. And I think, for example, like the web is just a fact of life today, right? And the web is a first-class citizen on the Serenity system, even though it's not mature yet. Like our web engine is obviously like immature, but we recognize that we need a fully fledged browser to exist, and we just have to embrace that because I'm the target user, so I have a bunch of things I need to do on the web. Obviously, I need a browser to do those things. And there are also a lot of conveniences that come from using modern tools. Like programming has evolved a lot in the last 20 years. And we are not shy to use C++20 right now and C++23. If that gives us better things that we can make use of, we'll integrate those as well. And that's something that I think a lot of people see Serenity and they assume it's a retro computing project or it's a nostalgia driven, like recreate the past kind of project, but it really isn't. It just has a look and feel from the past, but is built with modern tools, modern process, and everything.
Nice.
And something that sort of forces us to steer away from the old things is random hardware things like high DPI screens, for example. That's something that is just a fact of life now. A lot of people have high DPI screens, so we're gonna have to like support that in our system. And there's really no like, oh, how did Windows 2000 deal with that to fall back on?
Yeah.
I mean, they had some DPI support, but it was like not worth recreating. And I think just by existing in this new world where new things exist, the project is exposed to enough new concepts and new problems that we are forced to solve them. And the web, I think, is the biggest driver of this. That like I have a YouTube channel, and since I'm making the project for myself primarily, then I need to browse YouTube and like upload videos and watch videos and reply to comments.
That's a good point.
All of that is part of my use case, so I have to make that work. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into making that work, but we can do it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's how we avoid getting stuck in the past, that we try to solve the problems of today. We're not trying to solve the problems of the past. We're just going back to the aesthetics of the past and the mindset of the past and applying it to problems today and then trying to evolve the mindset.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I also guess that the idea also of I remember when we started discussing about Discord, you seemed very open to the idea of trying it out, and turns out that it was great. And now IRC had issues, and like you went full on board with Discord, and that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And I do get some shit for that because some people look at me and they mistake me for some kind of like ideological zealot, which I am not.
Yeah.
I'm not a free software absolutist or anything like that. I'm just a practical person who wants to build a system for myself to use. And Discord offers a lot of things that IRC did not, so we decided to try it. Turns out it was amazingly successful, and we've seen a huge increase in developer activity, in developer collaboration, and basically everybody agrees. Everybody who works on the project agrees that it's been a great success, right? So I'm glad that I was not weighed down by ideological thinking.
Yeah.
In a way that I think a lot of people are held back by free software absolutism and free software extremism to the point where they deny themselves powerful tools that could help them. And I understand how it's like because I was that way too when I was younger, and I don't hold it against anybody, but it is unproductive,
Yeah.
I think.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, by the way, we experience something similar also in the Zig community. Like occasionally I do get the message, 1 or 2 messages that tell me, Discord should not be used for an open source project because a few reasons, which, yeah, some are even also reasonable, I guess. And I'm perfectly happy one day to ditch Discord if something better comes out. But yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not loyal to Discord. You're just
yeah.
pragmatic.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I would say one last question, and then we give the final 10 minutes to the audience for them to ask questions. I've been monopolizing you long enough. So what do you think we should prioritize teaching to new generations?
Oh, to the new generations of programmers?
Yeah, because we mentioned that some things were lost in the past, right? And maybe some of it are like changes in let's say businesses that that nobody's under direct control, and like especially if you have a programming career, maybe you don't have the ability to control that much. But at the same time, I do think that like some of the old mindset, I guess, was kind of lost, right? Internet used to be much more fascinating, and there were more things to discover than today. Today it kind of seems like it's like the difference between a forest and a public park. Now it's a public park. A lot of the dangers, not all of them, but a lot of the dangers are not there anymore. But also a lot of the interesting things that not everybody knew. Now it's like in Monkey Island, where the treasure, it's actually a t-shirt that you get. First Monkey Island. Anyway, yeah, so what do you think should new generations learn?
I think self-reliance is, I guess, my favorite thing. That's I mentioned that earlier, that's something I'm trying to teach to people who participate in Serenity, and that you can make your own tools and you don't have to use stuff that other people made. And there's, of course, a time and a place to patch together frameworks and build applications. But I think it is really important that the next generation understands how things are really made. Like that I hope that people who decide to learn programming today don't end up only knowing the higher layers of the stack. And I think also that I want the new generation to not be afraid of complex software, to understand that no software is so complex that it can't be built again. I think all software can be built again by people. And there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's this ongoing narratives about how that's just not the case. But I think by especially with students, by having students build miniatures of things, then they open their minds enough that they realize on their own that these things are reconstructible.
Yeah.
And one issue I take in particular with the way education is done is that I know that computer science students are often taught operating systems classes where they either get to implement a simple kernel or they work on a piece of an educational kernel or something like that. And I think that's useful, but it's so outdated at this point when they should be teaching people to make a browser. And because that's the dominant operating system, like de facto in the world today, that runs and schedules content or software for people. And I think if one reason I suspect that new programmers today might feel less in tune with how their system works is because maybe they learned about operating systems, but they didn't learn about browsers. And if you teach people how to build a browser, even if it's just a simple miniature, I think that can go a long way to making people feel more like they understand how the things work.
Yeah. Like it demystifies the big, complex, scary thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that the big, complex, scary thing used to be the operating system, but it moved.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that education did not move along with it.
Yeah.
Because I've never been in higher education myself, but I meet a lot of students and they say, "Oh, I took an OS class." I just somebody was just saying on Discord yesterday that they just finished their OS class and it was all about Linux 2.7,
Wow.
which is like okay, but
I think the first Linux
that's
that I installed was like 2.3 or 2.5. Like, how old is 2.7? Holy shit.
that's really old. I I remember using 2.6 like more than 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my distro was Mandriva, which at the time was Mandrake. Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Yes,
That
I
old.
recall that as well.
Okay, so people in chat, you have one opportunity to ask Andreas a question, please. I know that there were questions already beforehand, but please, I don't have, my browser thing doesn't have an history that goes that far in the past, I think. Or actually, I have one, so I'll reutilize that one from Andy Jensen. But if everybody else asks that question, please just repeat it. Sorry. That's one day I'll implement my own chat thing for this with infinite history. So yeah, write the question, maybe tag me in it or tag Andreas so that we don't miss it. Andreas, if you find a particularly interesting question that you want to answer to, feel free. I would ask you the default question while people write down things, and which I ask everybody, which is when did you learn about Zig the first time? Have you tried it?
About Zig?
Yeah, when did you learn about Zig the first time, and have you tried Zig?
I think the first time I learned about, I want to say when there was this VLang drama,
Oh, okay.
and Andy was dunking on the guy on Hacker News. I think
Yeah.
that's when I learned about it.
Yeah.
And I thought like, who's this funny guy? So I looked up Andy and I learned about Zig.
Mhm.
And I have not tried it much. I installed it and I wrote like maybe 100 lines of it. So I
Okay.
don't have opinions worth hearing for sure.
Okay. That's fair. So there's this question by Andy Jansen that I mentioned earlier, which he's asking it to both of us, but I think you should definitely take the first stab at answering it. So he says, you are both part of successful projects with pretty vibrant communities. What would you say is the most important aspect or aspects of community building? Are there any advice that you would give to people trying to build communities around their own projects?
Okay, that's a good question. So it's something that I guess I experiment with a lot. I try to figure out what are the good ways to build community. So some things that I've noticed work really well is giving people a lot of credit for what they do. And for example, when I make these monthly videos I do about Serenity every month, about like, here's what we did in the last month, I always make sure to credit everybody who worked on some feature, and I encourage them to put their copyright in the file that they work on, and to talk about it as much as they want, and like say, nobody has to assign copyright to me. Nobody has to, I don't know, like sign copyright over to the project or anything like that. Like everybody gets as much credit as they are comfortable with. And I think it really changes the way people view their contributions if they are given the ability to take as much credit for them as they want. I still remember when I first worked on open source projects like 15 years ago, and I had finally worked, I was working on KDE at the time, and I had finally made some substantial change that I felt, okay, this is big enough that I can put my name in the comment in the top of the file. Like, I worked on this. And I felt so awesome from doing that. And just putting my name on something was so impactful to me that I still remember it today as like, wow, I was really a part of that thing. So I really try to give people that same opportunity, and not only give them the opportunity, but encourage them and kind of push them a little bit. Like, hey, like don't just let us swallow this. Like take credit. Like you made this. Um, and I also, for anybody who gets in more than 100 patches into the project, I always put them into the README as like a little, oh, this person made more than 100 commits. And they get like special feature on Discord, and they get their own custom email address and things like that. And I try to, I don't know, like provide all these different incentives for participating and working on it. And these are all based on things that have made me feel as more of a member of communities in the past. Like I still have my webkit.org email address, for example. I really liked when I got that one. And I wanted to do the same for people. So I give people SerenityOS.org addresses when they get 100 commits and stuff like that. I think really when it comes to like building community, my philosophy is that the community that you build is the people in that community. So you just have to build up the people, and then they will make your community. And you do that by boosting them in whatever way is available to you and makes sense.
Cool. Well, since the question was for me, I would just add from my perspective that, yeah, I agree with what Andreas is saying. One thing that I noticed that works really well in the community, which I think we should all thank Andrew for that, because I think he's the master of this, is also being good at clarifying your position with other people and understanding theirs. But it's not about conflict. It's about when people join an open source project, maybe they don't know how to do certain things, and you as the project maintainer, the better you pick up on that, the more you will be able to empower people to help you, and you will help them grow super quickly and have good interactions with them. And that goes for both technical things like using source control to also more abstract and sophisticated things. Like one very good example that I loved seeing was when somebody was interested in the hot code reload feature in Zig, which is being developed. And this was a person that has, works in the gaming industry, so I'm guessing has a lot of experience with these kind of systems. And that person was considering either working with Zig or doing it on their own with like their own programming language. And Andrew was very clear in saying, well, this is our interests, this is what we're going to do, this is a BDFL style project, so if you want to join, that's what you are going to subject yourself to, and if you want to, that's great. If you don't, and as you contribute, of course you will get more agency to make decisions. But if you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. We can still chat. You do your own thing, we do our own thing, and we're still perfectly friends. Like, just do what you think makes sense for you. And being able to, well, first of all, understand your own position and communicate to other people and understand their position, and then negotiate this is, I think, a very, very important skill that makes a ton of difference.
Yeah, totally. So somebody was asking if Serenity OS will ever be suitable for non-technical people.
Yeah.
And the answer is no.
Okay.
It's not for them.
Nice. Makes sense.
Unless some non-technical people start programming for the system and fix it to their needs, which sounds totally reasonable.
Okay.
That will probably happen.
Andreas, do you want to drive? You choose your questions.
Oh, shoot. Okay. So let's see. So somebody asks, what are your thoughts on having GCC, make, Git, bash, etc. on Serenity when the general philosophy is building everything yourself? My thoughts on that is that we have a bunch of ports that you can install. You can add ports to the system. You're perfectly welcome to do that. But these things will never, ever be dependencies of the base system. The base system will always stand on its own legs. And you can add things to it that you want, but it's not required. Going forward, we may or may not build our own variants of GCC, make, Git, and bash. Who knows? We have our own shell already, actually. But I have nothing against people wanting to use ports of third-party software. it's just not a priority for me. So they are strictly optional, and everybody seems fine with that. Okay, so let's see. Somebody says, thoughts on dog fooding Serenity outside of a VM, and how will it affect your focus? So currently I use QEMU, a VM, for almost all of my Serenity stuff. There are other people who are much more interested in running Serenity on bare metal machines than I am. To be honest, it's less interesting to me, this bare metal bring up stuff, and there are people who are really, really interested in that, so I just let them do their thing. But as I often say, when it becomes more convenient for me to use Serenity on bare metal, then I will just switch to it, because that is the long-term goal. But I got into this project knowing that it was going to take the rest of my life, so I am not in a hurry to to start inconveniencing myself just so I can say, oh, I'm running it on bare metal. I'm much happier using tools that work better today so I can work more efficiently today. And then when it gets to the point that I can be more effective in Serenity, I will just run it. And I know that it seems to disappoint some people who are sort of they take this absolute view that like it's not really an operating system if you're not running it on bare metal. But I don't know if I agree with that even. I certainly spent a lot of time running iOS in a simulator when I was working on iOS, and it still felt like we were building iOS. So I don't think of this really any differently. Did
Good
you see
point.
any good questions?
That was a very good point, by the way. Yeah. Let me see. I think this one is a little bit interesting. Let me find it. So do you have any goal for Serenity OS in 5 years? And if so, what are the goals? I would add a twist to that question, even though maybe that wasn't the intended meaning from the original author, but I would expand this not just from a technical perspective, but I would say for the Serenity OS project.
Wait, can you say again?
So
What was the twist?
the twist is like not just from a technical perspective or what are your goals 5 years from now for like the software, but also for the project in general. Like now you just went full time on it, so that's amazing. Do you see anything else happening in 5 years?
Oh, 5 years. That's a long time. So I guess I can take a wild
Yeah.
view. What I would like to do in 5 years is to record and edit and upload my videos from Serenity
Oh,
to YouTube. And in terms of where the project is, I would really like it if I'm not the only person who's able to work on it full time. That that would be my main desire, I guess. It would be really fun. And really, I hope that as we keep growing, that I'm able to convey my original vision to people sufficiently so that it doesn't start to become something else. And it has worked until this point, and I don't feel that it is a problem, but I hope that 5 years from now, I will still feel that way. And I think a lot of the things that I've had to learn about in the last year have been less technical and more social. Learning how to like organize people, who are like organize a very disorganized bunch of people into all doing something out of their own free will because they're having fun. That still pushes us all together towards a common goal, which is an undefined goal. And it is a very strange thing to try and do, but somehow it seems to work. and it's definitely not a direct science. There's like a lot of voodoo that goes into it. But yeah, I guess that's it. So technically, I just want to upload my videos on Serenity. I think that's a worthy goal.
That sounds great.
If you think,
Yeah.
yeah, if you think about like all the tech that we have to build to get that working, it's better not to think about it and just start doing it instead.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Well, as long as you don't like need extreme like editing filters and like advanced stuff, I think it's doable.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I know it's doable. It's just a whole lot of work.
Yeah.
And maybe the thing I would add to that is that um, doing a whole lot of work, like I know I can sit down and grind these things out um, myself if it comes to that. I'm very fortunate that I have so many people who want to help me because they enjoy working on this as well. And that allows things to move a lot faster. And I do find it a bit difficult to estimate like how much can we do together in 5 years. I know how much I can do in 5 years. So when I say I want to do YouTube in 5 years, that's because I optimistically believe I can do that myself in 5 years. Um, I don't know what we can do together. Um, so I think it will probably be a lot more.
Wow. That's a very nice way. That's a very nice way of answering that question. Yeah, I hope so too. For Zig, I think as the project is growing, we are also capable of doing more things in the same amount of time. So maybe it's not linear, of course, as collaboration tends to be, but yeah, it's awesome. Andreas, I think that was an amazing interview. Thank you very much for your time. And I would also say that I'm so looking forward to seeing SerenityOS grow because I'm interested in the project in general. I think I can appreciate your point of view where, people make fun of me sometimes in the Z community because I don't run Linux, I'm on a Mac, blah, blah, blah. But but at the same time, I think I get it. I get it, what it means for things to be tightly integrated together, like appreciating when you have a cohesive experience rather than everything being a patchwork of maybe partially maintained packages. And I'm very interested in helping you however way I can with all these voodoo things, which it's not like I'm super expert myself, but that's what I do for the Z community. And I think we totally need a little bit of voodoo juju in the open source world right now. So yeah, and is there anything else you want to say before we call it a day and I finally let you live your life?
I just want to say thank you to everybody who has decided to put in so much of their own free time to do this together with me, because this started out as just like a therapy project for me, trying to find something to do with my time. And the fact that it had spiraled so far out of control that other people are dumping their free time into it, it is just really nice. And I think I'm so grateful that I'm able to provide this playground for people around the world to have fun with programming, and it's a really nice thing. So just saying thank you to the community around the system, I guess, and to everybody who watched on Twitch.
Right. So let me just remind everybody to follow Andreas on Twitter. Follow Andreas. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. It's a very good YouTube channel. I mentioned how I got inspiration for a bunch of things for this interview, and I really mean it. It's generally great. Yeah, I think, Andreas, we should do another interview in the future. There's more questions I want to ask you.
Sure, yeah. And there were some more on the Twitch chat as well, so we can do those in the next one.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, thank you very much, then. I think that's it. Thank you everyone for watching, and I guess I'll catch you next Showtime, which should be about a month from now. So don't get used to Showtime every week. So, bye everybody.
This is how we